Today I want to talk about helping your kids understand what their superpowers are. So I'll talk about why mathematically your child is pretty likely, almost guaranteed to have a superpower. Number two, why it's important to tell them about it, to point it out to them. And number three, I'll give some examples of what some of these superpowers are. So first off, there's a Harvard professor named Ted Rose, and he wrote a book called The End of Average. He also talks on this topic. So his point is that nobody is average. Average is kind of a false construct, or at least it's not a useful construct when it comes to predicting individuals. Just as one example, when they built the first jet airplane, they needed to figure out what size to make the cockpit so that the pilots could fit into it. So they went around and they took the measurements of nearly 10,000 pilots, and then they averaged. They took all kinds of dimensions like knee to ankle, knee to hip, just the measurements, how wide they are, how tall they are, all of the different things that you would need to make a cockpit the right size, and then they averaged the numbers. And when they were done, what they found was that out of 10,000 pilots, the seat didn't work for any of them. If they narrowed, there was nobody. There might have been 4 people out of 10,000 who were within 20 or 30% of the normal or of the average on just the 3 main measurements. Everybody was an outlier, and so that's his whole point. Is how when you go on a video game and you can adjust the traits of, you have the little slider to how big is his nose, how wide are his eyebrows, humans are like that, but they're not near the average. They tend to be toward the outside, and our school system is set up to around averages, and most people, it turns out, are outliers on both sides of the equation, or have some serious outliers on both sides of the equation, both positive and negative. And so what that means is your child has some trait where they are just genuinely unusual, genuinely gifted, genuinely better than other people are. But the problem is that the school system can't recognize that. I'll give some examples in just a minute. So you can't, it'll recognize if someone is good at math, or if they're good at English, or if they're good at, things like that. But a lot of other traits that I'll get into in a minute, it can't identify. Now, it's important to point these strengths out to your child because they will be unaware that they have them. Like, for example, if someone is good at rhyming, they won't know that they're good at rhyming. They'll just be going along, doing their little rhyme thing, and they'll just think that nobody else likes it, or no one else does it, or that everybody else is bad at it. It won't occur to them that that's a gift. They're kind of an outlier in that category. And so okay, fine. I'll give one example. We had one child who he would hear a song once on the radio, and then he would sit down on the piano and he would not pick out the melody. He would pick out the entire song, all the different parts, and then he would say, "Yeah, can you come help me with this part?" I'm like, "I can't help you at all." And he was in grade school at the time. He didn't know, he thought everybody could do that, or he thought it was just his weird little thing. He didn't understand that he was an outlier in that area. Okay, and so music, sports, and academics tend to be the areas that we focus on. So let me give some examples of other things to look for. And by the way, just because you find that they're an outlier in one area don't saddle them with that for the rest of their life. If the kid's good at music, don't make them go into music. They can be outliers in lots of things, and what they're good at can drift. And really it's up to them anyway. But your job as a parent is to point out that they're good at it. Okay? Just point out that they're good at it. That doesn't mean they have to do it. If your kid has a knack for bowling, it doesn't mean he has to be a pro bowler. You know, it's okay. So just some examples of things to look, oddities to look for. We had one of our daughters noticed everything. Everything. When she was 2 or 3 years old, if my wife couldn't find the can opener, she would ask the 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old would go get it. Now, she hadn't hid it. That's what most people suspect. But like even now she's married and she's out of the house and all of that. But when she comes over to visit, if my belt's missing, I can call her a day or two later and ask her where it is, and she'll say, oh, it's on your shelf upstairs. How? I don't know. She records everything in her head as she goes through that. What class would she take in school that would reveal that she's good at that? There isn't one. That's just something that as a parent we noticed, and her brothers and sisters noticed, and we pointed out to her early on, and that became kind of part of her identity. She understood, hey, I'm good at this. Other people aren't. That way she doesn't get frustrated when other people don't. You know, someone lost their keys. How do you lose your own keys? You know, she doesn't understand that, you know, until she finds out that no, you're the weird one. You're the special one. You remember where everything is. Another example, one of my daughters, my wife, to keep her entertained when she was 2 or 3 years old at church, my wife would draw a circle on a white piece of paper and hand it to her. And this little 3-year-old would sit there with the pencil and perfectly shade in the circle until it was completely black. I didn't, you know, there was some article online about worthless superpowers, and you know, like the guy who could attract slugs, you know, or whatever. But I wouldn't say this is quite in that same category, but it shows just a profound attention to detail and concentration, which is unusual for a 2 or 3-year-old. I mean, did we draw any firm conclusions? No, but we noted that's unusual. Pay attention to this, you know. And then now as she's gotten older, I don't think we've ever reminded her to do her homework. She just remembers and does it and executes. I mean, she's good at that type of thing. That's just, you know, one example of something someone can be good at. We had a daughter who, they have these online games where you go out and you mine and you smelt metal and you like dig dirt. And this was back before Minecraft. It was called Runescape. And you'd have thousands of people playing this game at the same time, and they're all fishing and hunting and chopping wood, you know, all of this type of stuff. And I saw my daughter playing this game, and I noticed that she was just sitting in the town square. And I asked her, why aren't you playing? And she says, I am playing. Well, why don't you run off and play? And she says, I can't, because, you know, my workers I've got to wait for them. I told them that I'd meet him here. I don't know how she had done this, but she had like a dozen people she had met online and had employed them. I don't even know how that works, but they were off gathering materials for her, bringing it back. And I mean, and I don't know how. Anyway, so after she finished high school, she was working in a warehouse, you know, it was during summer vacation while she was going to college. And then she was just a lowly warehouse worker, and her manager left for a couple of weeks and asked her, hey, can you take over for me while I'm out? When he got back 2 weeks later, he got chewed out. Why? Because in the 2 weeks he had gone, productivity had hit all-time highs. Everything just ran phenomenally well. She had maybe 2 months of experience in a warehouse, period. But she knows how to make people do stuff and want to do stuff and do it for her and doesn't have a problem asking them to do it. And they loved her and wanted to hire her. And she's like, I still got to finish school, and went off to school. And anyway. But what course could you take at school that would reveal that ability? There isn't one. You could take like a leadership elective, but then you're just learning. There's no way for a child to discover that they have that ability. She didn't know she had that ability until I talked to her about it. Another example. Some kids are funny. Some kids are just outlandishly funny. That's just how they think. That's how their brain works. They just crack people up. Now, is that going to win them points at school? Are they going to get a good grade for funny? No, the grade for funny in school is called citizenship. And usually the funnier you are, the lower the grades you get. So they're going to come out thinking that's a bad trait. Your job as a parent is to let them know that that's special, that they're good at that. Help them know when to use it, but let them know that's unusual, that's special, they're good at it, that's their superpower. I've got another daughter. When she holds babies, they fall asleep. Period. Baby's fussy and crying, you hand it to her, and it's fast. Like 30 seconds later, the kid's head's, at some weird angles, how babies sleep, and she's walking around holding this sleeping baby. Okay, that's not her only superpower, but man, it's weird. She's an outlier in that regard. We probably have other people who couldn't put a baby to sleep to save their life. All of these things are event planning. Some people just naturally plan events. Some people are good at sales. Some people are persuasive. Some people have a gift with animals. A dog snarling and barking, and this kid will run up and give it a hug. And, it's, some are artistic. Some can manage. Some have spatial ability. All of those things that I just mentioned, there isn't a major for that. There's not even a grade for that in high school. So your job as a parent is to help them identify what that superpower is. I wear a lot of hats. One of the many hats that I wear is helping people build their resumes. I do work in the energy efficiency industry, and I'm an adjunct at a local college, and I work with students on how to make an entrance into the industry. And it's really sad when you have a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old or even a 20-year-old, and they're trying to fill out their resume, and for the life of them, they don't know what they're good at. They don't know what their talent is. They don't know what they have to offer the world. They just don't. I'll give one very brief example there. One of my favorite students, she had been a tattoo artist and had also worked at doing vehicle inspections, for this state registration. And, what do you do with that? That's how do you work with that? Well, here's the thing. Attention to detail, tattoo artist. Is there a profession that says attention to detail more than tattoo artist? On her resume, I told her, don't put, I have attention to detail. Put down, I was a tattoo artist. If your employer doesn't recognize that means attention to detail, you don't want to work for them. And then, to get paid to turn people down when you inspect their car and quote chapter and verse and have them be okay with it, or if they're not okay with it, have you be okay with it, that's a different sort of skill set too. That's transferable. There's a place for that type of person in an organization as well. Somebody who can understand and enforce the rules. Somebody who's got an incredible attention to detail. And by the way, this was a fun person too on top of it. And really the stuff that you learn at school is what you're doing, but it's not how you're doing it. It's not the unique thing that you bring to the job. It's not the unique thing that you bring to the world. This has been a long video. If you're still with me, thank you. And by the way, you can click subscribe if you want. Normally I'm on a different topic, but you're welcome to subscribe to hear future stuff. As a parent, again, make sure your children understand what their superpowers are. Have a family night where everyone gets together and identifies what everyone's superpowers are. It's fun. The kids love it. You'll love it. It'll change their life. It really will. They are outliers in some areas. Make sure they know what that is. And if you wouldn't mind, in the comment section, put down what your kid's superpower is. Put down the weird, quirky thing that they do. And that is just unusually good and unusually weird. That's all I have. Talk to you later.